In this problem, we're asked to sketch this polar point, -5, -pi over 6, and then to find 3 other polar coordinates for that, given restrictions on r and restrictions on what my theta is allowed to be. So first, if we start by plotting the point -5 pi over 6. So remember that this r value tells us what the size of our radius of our circle is, so how far out we want to be from the origin. So if I pick a spot here on the x-axis and let that be my radius of 5 on my circle, then I want to sketch my theta. So from my, just like any other angle that you're going to sketch, I'm going to start from the positive x-axis. And because my theta is negative, I'm going to rotate in the counterclockwise direction, pi over 6. So that puts me about right here. Now, because the r is negative, I'm going to take my present location here, and I'm going to reflect that through the origin. So that's going to put my final location for that polar point there in the second quadrant. So I know that this amount of rotation from the positive x-axis is the same as the amount of rotation from the negative x-axis. So that amount of rotation here is pi over 6. So here's the location of that first polar point. So if we move to the next one where we've got some restrictions, we're asked to sketch or to come up with the polar coordinates. So for that same location, I still want to end here in the second quadrant, and I still want the amount of rotation here to be the same. I still want that amount of rotation to be pi over 6. We're still going to be out for a radius of 5. Since r is positive here, I don't have any reflection. So for my spot here, I'm just going to use a positive r of 5. Now for the rotation, because theta is between -2 pi and 0, I want to rotate from the positive x-axis in a clockwise direction so that I end up with a negative theta. So if I rotate all the way over to where I want to be, that's going to be a rotation of, if I go all the way from the positive x-axis to the negative x-axis there, that's a rotation of -pi. And then I want another pi over 6. So I want another -pi over 6. So my overall rotation to get over to this polar point is going to be a rotation of -7 pi over 6. Now in the next one, we want to have r be less than 0. So our r is going to be the -5. And we want our theta to be between 0 and 2 pi. So that means that our rotation is going to go in the counterclockwise direction. So remember, we still want to end up right here at 5 with an amount of rotation from there to from the negative x-axis to be pi over 6. But with an r of -5, that includes a reflection through the origin. So that means that I need to rotate so that I end up over in this fourth quadrant, so that when I find this location, reflect it through the origin, I end up back where I want to be. So the rotation that I need to figure out is from the positive x-axis all the way over to this spot here, where remember this amount of rotation in here was pi over 6. So my overall rotation is going to be, if I went all the way, if I swung all the way from the positive x-axis back to the positive x-axis, that would be a rotation of 2 pi. But I want to take off this little bit here, that pi over 6. So if I take 2 pi and subtract pi over 6, that will give me my overall rotation of 11 pi over 6. So check that just real quick. If I sketch -5, 11 pi over 6, make sure that we end up over here where we should. So my radius is 5. My rotation is 11 pi over 6, which means I rotate counterclockwise to 11 pi over 6, which is here. But then because my r is negative, I reflect that through the origin, which puts me in the same location as that original polar point. Finally, we've got one here where we want to have a positive r, so my r is positive 5, and my rotation is between 2 pi and 4 pi. So I want to end up here with a rotation that goes in the counterclockwise direction because it's positive, all the way a complete rotation of 2 pi, and then back over to where I want to be. And remember, where I want to be was pi over 6 off of that negative x-axis. So this is the rotation here that we need to figure out. So we know with that rotation that we've gone completely around, so that's 2 pi. And then we went an additional amount from here to here. And that rotation there would be a total of 5 pi over 6. So if I take 2 pi and add 5 pi over 6 to that, I get my rotation as 17 pi over 6.